Hey there, Mark Brown. This is like your territory, but I love it too. You're just
Okay.
better at it than me, but I appreciate as the listener the work and the effort and the time that people put into wordsmithing. So I'm going to grab my dictionary just
Sure.
just so what do you call it?
The lexicon, my friend, the lexicon.
Yeah, see, I have to go look that up to see what it was. But if you don't know the story, Mark Brown, even in grade school, was told by his classmates that what does it say in your yearbook, Mark?
Yeah, it says always seen in the center of a crowd, relating one of his experiences to his listeners who have to make sure they have their dictionaries with them for frequent consultations. He actually wrote that.
Yeah, they
Hey,
didn't
I'm a word nerd, man. I'm a self-confessed word nerd. I love words.
they
So,
didn't write that in mine.
Anyone can give a presentation. Few deliver unforgettable presentations. What's the difference? You're about to find out. Welcome to the Unforgettable Presentations Podcasts with your hosts, world champion speakers and coaches Mark Brown.
Your life tells a story, and there's someone out there who needs to hear it.
And Darren LaCroix.
Stage time, stage time, stage time.
Ready for some powerful presentation ahas? Let's dive right in.
I got to chuckle, Darren. I mean, I love words, and those of us who have followed the podcast for the last, 4 years, will probably remember episode 182 earlier in 2023. We interviewed one of the most famous soccer football commentators in the world, Peter Drury, an acquaintance of ours, and he said, "You have to love the words to do what I do." Well, as presenters, we should love our words too. And I confess, I'm a word nerd. Yes, I used to read the dictionary for fun in junior high school. It does happen, right? And for those who may be new to the podcast, quick story. I think it was eighth grade in my English class, and the young man came to our classroom door, all boys school in Jamaica, and he said, "Sir, I need to borrow a dictionary." One of my classmates said, "Hey, Brown, this kid wants to talk to you." And the whole class busted out laughing because they knew that I would read a dictionary for fun. And I'm a word nerd. I have not one, but two dictionary apps on my mobile phone. One is called the Free Dictionary, and the other is called Word Hippo, a tool we all use for many, many ways to manage our words and use our words. Why do I say all this, Darren? Because as presenters, words are our tools.
Mhm.
And words well put together can be very effective in not just sharing information with the audience, but it can also help to give them the experience of being with you. Words are used for storytelling. Words are used to create emotion, generate emotion. Words are our tools, and we should not take them lightly and just toss any word in. It behooves us to use the words and choose the words that will most effectively accomplish the goal we have set for any story, any anecdote, passing information on, and indeed for our entire presentation, be it a 7-minute talk or a 3-day workshop. That's my spiel, man.
Yeah, words matter. Words matter. And if you want to be unforgettable, you got to learn to love the language.
I
Now,
love it.
maybe not as much as Mark, but we have to appreciate the value of great writing. If you want to be unforgettable, you've got to, as Mark said, you must be selective to be effective,
Indeed.
which is catchy and memorable, which is the point. That they take your message home with them. And so, Mark, you had such great examples in your championship speech, and I've seen all the edits that you did with David Brooks, your
Yes.
mentor.
Yes.
And when it comes to editing, there's a famous quote that we learned from Patricia Fripp about wordsmithing from the great comedian Jerry Seinfeld. Mark, what's that quote?
Seinfeld said, "I will spend an hour taking an 8-word sentence and editing it down to 5. Let's pause for a second, Darren. An hour to take an 8-word sentence and edit that 8 words down to 5, which means Jerry Seinfeld, one of the most successful comedians of all time, invests the time to wordsmith his humor so the audience can get the full experience. He wants to shorten the time between the setup and the punchline. As presenters, Darren, why should we be any different? Right? If we invest the time, an hour to remove 3 words from a sentence, and here's a man at the top of his game for how many years, Darren? What, 30 years or more, right? If he is willing to invest that much time, effort, and energy to create that experience for his audience, again, not just to get a laugh, but to create the experience for his audience, it's our responsibility to make a similar investment to give our audiences an experience that they will remember. If you want to be unforgettable, Darren, you got to put in the work with words. And by the way, my coach, my mentor, David Brooks, his company back in 1994 was called Working with Words. Who knew?
Yeah, and Mark, in your speech, it's not just the fewer words. So Jerry Seinfeld talks about getting from punchline to punchline in fewer words, which is important. But we're also not just talking about fewer words. We're talking about stronger, more unforgettable words.
Definitely.
In your speech, you had some great alliterations, and you said it's using words to say so much in so little time, but set the seed so deep, we can't forget. So Mark, you talked about in your speech, one of my favorite lines is when you talked about the plight of the homeless and the reporter who took on the persona. So I could say, let me just say, here's how I would say it, version 1, and then let's see what Mark turned into. So I would say, so this reporter took on the persona of the homeless, and she was cold. She wrapped in the clothes type of clothes that they wore, and she was playing a part because there was a hidden camera following what she did and how people interacted with her, and so she would huddle in the corner of a doorway in the middle of winter in whatever city it was, and New York City, and just take on that persona to see what it was like. But Mark, how did you say all this?
To appreciate their circumstance, she dressed as they dressed. She walked as they walked. She lived as they lived for several days. She carried a concealed microphone, and the hidden camera crew followed her every move. Yeah, so that was, the last part was, it was snowing, bitterly cold. And there she sat, huddled in a doorway, shivering, trying to fend off the bone-chilling winds, but hardly anyone noticed her. That's a mouthful.
Yeah, but that wasn't version 1.0, I'm guessing.
No, it was not. It was not. I had to wordsmith the scene because I wanted the audience to not only see it, and don't get me wrong, in your rendition, the audience could see she was dressing as they were in the hallway, and it was cold in winter in New York City. They could see that. But I wanted to use words that were rhythmic and therefore more memorable to create the emotional piece as well as the visual piece. When I said to appreciate their circumstance, she dressed as they dressed, she walked as they walked, and she lived as they lived. I used the as they in a triad. So it was 3 visuals, but I used triads, and I repeated the words as they walked, dressed as they dressed, lived as they lived. And it might be worth your while, friends, to study rhetorical devices. We have some friends who love these. Our dear friend Linda Marie Miller is the queen of rhetorical devices. And Ed Tate also loves rhetorical devices, fellow world champion and certified speaking professional Ed Tate. But I use that for the rhythm of it, for the experience of it, and the visual impact of, and I physically on stage, I I put the coat on, I shuffled along, so I walked as they walked, I dressed as they dressed. And when I say lived as they lived, I pointed to a place on the ground, on the street where she lived. Then I said, there she sat, huddled in her doorway, shivering. I physically huddled, and I used the word huddled because some words have a sound to them that just really has impact. Darren, 22 years ago, when you and I worked together, you had a little pamphlet you were giving out about funny words. And you were teaching a principle, which I'd like you to share real quickly, but regarding wordsmithing, about words that have a K sound and funny words. What was that principle you were teaching about using words effectively for humorous impact? Funny sounding words.
From our humor boot camp, we do a whole section, which I learned from my mentor, Dave Fitzgerald, about funny words, and that it is an impingement word. And this is, we're talking your language. I learned it from Dave, but this is like the one big word that I know. Impingement. An impingement means to strike or collide. So when a sound in a word strikes the listener, it then grabs attention and can be more memorable, which we're talking about here, being unforgettable, taking the time. Look, this is a speech. Let's say we're not talking about hey, it would help in a speech contest, but I'm even thinking more out there, keynote speaking. This is what you do. You got one speech or maybe two, but one speech. Why would you not take the exact same thing you say, sit down like Seinfeld, wordsmith like Mark Brown, and say, how could I say it in a more vibrant, vivid, memorable way?
Perfect.
So the hard K sound, to strike or collide, which is why, the F-bomb in the comedy world is done a lot and it gets attention. And if you use it too much for new comedians, it just gets old. And now it's just a rhetorical device that turns you into a rhetorical, boring person on stage. So the hard K sound at the end of the F-bomb is strikes or collide. So it's profanity plus striking and colliding. So boom. Yeah, it could get a laugh. That's not what we're here to, but the principle, having the hard K sound, snack, smack. In one of my early jokes, and I would tell a story about my Subway shop, I would say this lady came in with this scowl on her face. She was a pickle sniffer. Pickle sniffer, like, got a laugh in and of itself. And because I recorded myself, I just did it by accident one day, and I was like, "Ooh, that got a laugh." Write it down. Pickle sniffer. Like, it gives you a vivid image. When I set it up by saying she had a scowl on her face, you could see her, looking over the food and everything. So it is taking the time and using the words. There's always a better word. And it's our job to be unforgettable to find it. So we did a whole episode on foundational phrases. So this is not just your foundational phrase, but absolutely applies to your foundational phrase. So we can say more in fewer words. And Mark, I wrote down a couple that I heard recently that just struck me because I knew we were going to do this podcast. One of them was by Stephen Furtick. It was actually he's a pastor.
Yeah.
My favorite online pastors. Some people say he's overzealous. I love it because it's my style. But he is great with words, and he had a sermon. And just understand this: in 4 words, he said so much with the title. And by the way, Mark has not heard this yet. This is new to Mark. I didn't share this ahead of time. But he said, "Bent knees break chains." Bent knees break chains. So he could have said, well, if you get down on your knees and pray and ask for help, your life can change, even if they're, so we're saying so much in 4 words, but I'm sure that just didn't happen. He had to take the time and create that image, as well as use or choose the right 4 words to get the point across in 4 words.
And there's one more key piece to this, Darren. The 4 words he chose were all monosyllabic. one syllable each. Fewer words and fewer syllables are easier to remember.
Mhm.
Bent knees break chains. All one syllable, a sentence, a phrase, but a message right there with 4 words. So think about this in your wordsmithing. How can I take a 4-syllable word and find one that's 2 syllables? Enter word hippo, one of our favorite tools, first introduced to me by a professional editor when we were doing our book, Deliver Unforgettable Presentations, a year ago. And this word hippo is a tool that we use and that we share in Stage Time University with all our clients as well. You go to the thesaurus, which of course, as you know, a thesaurus is a volume that has other words for words, which begs the question, what is another word for thesaurus? I don't know. But using a thesaurus, such as wordhippo.com online, the beauty of that particular tool is it'll give you words in 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 syllables. It's a tool. You may also wish to use your favorite AI tool to ask, could you give me 10 monosyllabic words that mean unforgettable? And it'll do its best to answer that question for you. My point is, whatever tool you choose to use, avail yourself of these resources to help you to be more compact and condensed, to be succinct and concise, but still effective in your presentations. Succinct and concise, but yet still effective. I had to use some words, Darren. I couldn't help myself. But the idea is fewer words, shorter sentences, fewer words, fewer syllables are much more unforgettable and memorable than long, drawn out 85-word sentences. Challenge for everyone. And I've had my clients do this. Look at the latest script you have written and count the words in your longest sentence, count the words in your average sentence. If you got 15, 16 words in a sentence, you need to do some wordsmithing to cut that bad boy down into bite-sized pieces. And Darren, this also applies on television. You've been interviewed quite a few times, I know certainly in Vegas, and when the host asks questions, they need succinct, short answers. They don't want a table topic Toastmasters 2-minute speech. They need short answers because sometimes your segment is 4 minutes or fewer on a TV broadcast. And that may be where you live right now in terms of what you're doing. So think clarity and brevity combined. How you do that? Wordsmithing.
And ask yourself over and over again, because this isn't my strength, I had to work harder at it, but I also knew its importance. My original championship speech was 1,492 words. I had to get it down to 800, 750 in that range. So every day I would send Mark a new version, but the overriding question, get this, how do I say it better in fewer words? Not just how do I say it in fewer words, how do I say it better in fewer words? So that gets my brain looking for that, looking for the better ways. And I remember I had 3 paragraphs in the original version that it came down to a sentence or 2 in my championship speech. Well, it was just a lot of blah, blah, blah that wasn't relevant to my point, that took the audience off on a tangent, that wasn't wordsmithing. Mark, I heard a new one this weekend too, and I love, this might be one of what you call the rhetorical devices, but this is one you've probably never heard of. I had never heard of, and it was a woman named Valerie Cummins, who is a coach here in Vegas, and she said, I didn't do it the wrong way, I did it the long way. And I just thought that was, ooh. So she didn't do it wrong, she did it long. So we have those wrong and long that helps make that statement instead of just saying, look, I took way too much time. I could have done it so much more quickly. It's just good, succinct, and powerful.
That particular line, Darren, reminds me of a court case that took place 30 years ago, the O.J. Simpson trial. And I remember at one point, one of the attorneys for the prosecution was addressing the jury. And it was Mr. Darden was a prosecutor. And he made a statement because Ron Goldman had passed away in a tragedy as well. And he said, Ron Goldman was in the wrong place at the wrong time. Nicole Brown Simpson was in the wrong place for a long time.
Mm.
And he dropped that line in there. And I thought, wow, he had rhythm, he had rhyme, he had wordsmith that. So here's a thought. Don't underestimate the value of rhythm and rhyme when you're wordsmithing, but be selective to be effective. You're not writing an epic poem, but you're using words selectively at certain places and in certain ways for the impact, both visually and emotionally, along with the auditory impact you have from the words. These are simple tools: rhythm, rhyme, alliteration. When used well, you become that much more memorable and by default, unforgettable as well. It's great.
Mark, I heard this in what you were saying. If I put it together, if you use rhythm and rhyme, you'll have more impact in less time.
Oh,
Damn.
did you just wordsmith that?
I'm channeling my inner Mark Brown.
More impact in less time.
You use
Rhythm and rhyme, more impact in less time. You know what? I'm going to write that down so I can refer to it later on. Darren's on a roll, friends. This is not his strong suit. He'll tell you that. I'm not putting him down. He'll tell you that.
No, absolutely.
Wordsmith, but this is really good. And
I understand its importance, even though it's not my strength. So if it's not your strength, get some help. Get a writing buddy. Yep. Sit down with one of your stories over coffee or over Zoom and just say, hey, here's what I'm trying to say. But someone else will give you an outside perspective. But you're the director, you're the CEO of your speech. So you need to get some help. Here's the cool part. A little bit of effort is going to be divided by a whole boatload of audiences that you'll be in front of for the rest of your career. So yes, it takes some time. Jerry Seinfeld took the time. Jerry Seinfeld, top of his profession. If you want to be unforgettable, here's an area to spend some time. Get a coach, whether it's Mark or me. Well, if it's wordsmithing, don't call me.
You're already kind, my friend.
Yeah, Mark. Well, I have a strength, and my strength is on delivery, on the characters, and in the setting the scene. That's just what I love. That's where I love. If you don't know, Mark and I also do dynamic duo coaching that you both of us 2-on-1. Just go to getaspeakingcoach.com. You see our whole boatload of coaches. If you want comedy or humor writing, Chris McGuire, Stephanie McHugh, she's on that page. Each coach has their own specific strengths. So Mark, knowing we were going to do this, my RAS, reticular activating system, was out there looking for great writing. I heard this one. I searched it to see who it should be credited to. It was one preacher, Bob Lohman, and Robert Shula as well. It's great writing. I don't know who originated it, but when you're down to nothing, God is up to something.
That's rhythm. And the opposite of something and nothing. So the combination of the rhythm, the combination of the contrast. Oh, Darren, you're talking my language. Get it?
I thought we'd have a Markgasm, a writing-gasm. I do enjoy it. I don't enjoy the process as much, but I do it because it's important. When I was working on 17 Minutes to Your Dream, starting a whole brand new keynote a couple of years ago when I wrote the book, I would use my audience to see what was landing. So I did it for a lot of Toastmaster clubs and districts and whatever for free because I was working it out. My writing is best in front of the audience and recording it and then going back and changing it. But I love that feedback. What hit? Because I was looking to see the foundational phrases from this whole boatload of new content that worked. And then I would emphasize those and get rid of the ones that weren't working. So you are the CEO of your speech. That seemed to hit people. Oh, I'm in charge. This is my speech. And when I talked about going back to Nineveh, the story of Jonah and the whale, and then I would come back to the audience. Have you been swallowed by the whale of self-doubt?
Metaphor. Love that.
So, and those were the things that I would hear back at the end. What were your keepers? Well, when you start hearing your foundational phrases back as keepers, They're keepers. Those are good. And I had some, I'm like, what? But didn't you like that one? But I can adjust it and try it again. But anyway, so you can also get a writing buddy, get a coach, and also use the audience, see what's landing. And then if it is like a Toastmaster organization or group, you can also ask, hey, does anybody have a better way to say ba, 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 ba?
Right.
And almost all of the time, there'll be a wordsmith in your audience, someone will have a great idea. And I remember when I was working on the metaphor of the rope, and I had it sectioned off in 1-inch sections, and I was doing this metaphor about 158 hours in a week. And someone in the audience in a practice session said, your rope is their hope. And I was like, oh, that's good. So sometimes we can use the audience to get ideas, and people want to help. People want to help. So may come from an audience member, may come from a rating buddy, may come from a coach, or it may come to your focusing. By the way, I'm going to ask dictionary.com if you're listening, you got to up your game, because you don't have wordsmithing as a word on dictionary.com. It is on wordhippo.com.
And Google knows it too. Google defines it.
Yeah, so it is a word, but I love the tool of Word Hippo. It's very simple, gives you rhymes, you can play around with it. And as Patricia says, it's challenging to be creative in isolation.
That's right.
Unless you have a tool. If you have a good tool, it makes it easier, more fun, but always better if you can, grab a coffee, grab a glass of wine, and get some help.
And you mentioned, Darren, having your foundational phrase. For a presentation, a foundational phrase repeated, that's what the audience remembers. It's worth our while to invest time to make these foundational phrases memorable. Also, when you deliver your nuggets of wisdom, is there a way to deliver a nugget of wisdom that is rhythmic, that has rhyme, has impact, has emotional not consequence, but emotional impact? If the point you make can be repeated, and I love what our mentor, the inimitable Miss Patricia Fripp says, speak to be remembered and repeated. If your audience can repeat the points you make, can repeat your points of wisdom, repeat your foundational phrase, if they can be clear on the premise of your presentation, that's when you are having impact, because they remember it and they'll repeat it to someone else. These terms, these words, these phrases don't often trip lightly across our lips instantaneously. They do take work. And think also in terms of your value propositions. We talk about your foundational phrase, or what's the premise of your speech, or what do you do? How do you identify the value you bring to any audience? We often say, can you say it in 10 words or fewer? That's the editing piece. And can you say it in a way that's rhythmic enough for the audience to remember it? I want to hire that person. Darren, Ed Tate talks about how certain people have sold their businesses and what they offer by writing the right words and creating the right description. So when they ask, what do you do? I help so-and-so, I help people save money on their homes. That sounds nice. How can you recreate that? What do you do, Mark? I coach speakers to be better. That's fine. I have in the past used, I help presenters to shine on stage and online. Shine on stage, online. That's more rhythmic. And they know I'll help you do a virtual presentation. I'll help you do a live, but I'll also help you shine. And it took me a while to come up with that. And I have a program now called Shine on Stage and Online. And I teach that program. That did not happen in a vacuum or overnight. That took a while. It took me working with you and Stage Time and going through the same exercises to create a phrase that in a few words helps the audience know exactly what I do and who I do it for. So take this challenge not just to be useful in the presentation, but expand the value to yourself regarding how you describe your business or whatever it is you offer to those who are listening when you meet a prospect. This technique and this principle can literally transform your presentations, and it will be helpful for your business as well, if you use the tool of wordsmithing and use it wisely and well.
Mark Brown says it best. So invest in a wordsmithing buddy, whether it's just buying him a coffee or hiring a coach if it's not your strength. And if it is your strength, get another wordsmither to go along, because you're going to multiply this effort, this time, this investment is multiplied by, think about it, every presentation you give and on your website, you have a better, more catchy title that will make an event planner go, we need that. If it's concise, if it gets the point across, and if you're offering your new, fresh perspective. So, Mark, that's why I love working with you. We have varying strengths, but we collaborate well and we have fun. Thanks for listening to this. Happy New Year coming up. We really love what we get to do, and please pass this on. If you like this podcast or one of our other episodes, please pass it on. We love what we get to do and want to help you help your audience. Mark Brown, take us home.
Use your words, choose your words, be a wordsmith, and you will be unforgettable. See you next week.
Yeah, and lose some words.
Hey there, this is Darren LaCroix. Thanks for checking out this podcast episode on YouTube. If you want all of them, not every one is on YouTube, check out your favorite podcast platform so you don't miss an episode. Keep being a sponge so you can be unforgettable.
Check out StagetimeUniversity.com, where good presenters become unforgettable.